It really shouldn't be that hard to understand, but the religious never can they? Their religions are no better than any other because all religions are irrational and unsupported, no matter how much they wish that that wasn't true. But they're not at all interested in reality, are they? In fact, they're terrified of it. They'd much rather embrace irrationality and wishful thinking, which is what we're going to see again today. This never gets old, right? Oh, wait, it does. We're back with Tim Barnett and his strange witch friend, although she does not actually appear in this video. Instead, Tim doubles down and makes a massive fool of himself, as if anyone ought to be surprised. Because that's what Tim does in every single video, right? Every apologist does. But here, he's going to make himself look especially dumb, but I'll let you see that for yourself. What the hell is wrong with these people? Really? Is there an explanation that doesn't come down to just stupidity? Let me know what you think, and let's get back to the disaster already in progress.
All major religions are not saying the same thing at the core.
No, there's a whole range of stupid stuff that they're saying, and you, just because you really like the idea, you're going to pretend the stupid stuff that your religion says is better than the stupid stuff of other religions. But I like it doesn't make it real or worthwhile, and of course, that's why Tim is making this video for existing believers in his own religion, because they're likely going to accept the nonsense that he's spouting because they just really want to believe. But every religion can do exactly what Tim is doing, and most do. We're unique because we really like what we believe, and we don't have that feeling about any other religion. It always comes down to feelings, and feelings don't mean anything. So this is just dumb.
While they may share some surface similarities, they make fundamentally different and often contradictory claims. And two contradictory beliefs can't both be true at the same time.
But they can both be false, and that's something that neither Tim nor the advocates for any other religion want to admit. Because truth is really all that matters, and no religion out there has any evidence to back up their wishful thinking and empty claims. Faith has absolutely no bearing on factual reality, but the religious have nothing else, do they? This is why he's only preaching to the choir. His choir, not to anybody else's. No one who doesn't already believe is going to take any of this seriously, and because Tim and his buddies at Stands Against Reason want to be taken seriously, they're going where the blind faith is, and that's not a good thing. It's why I am openly critical of all stupidity, no matter where it's found. If you can't justify it with evidence, then you should not believe it at all. And that goes for absolutely everything. Too bad the religious can't get that through their heads, right?
This is called the law of non-contradiction. Take the question, what happens when we die?
Nothing. Demonstrably nothing. Your brain turns off and you, everything identifiable as you, that was the product of the physical brain, it ceases to exist. The electrochemical reactions that made you, they stop working, and you're not there anymore. I know a lot of people don't like that, but liking things doesn't matter. This is where you need to put your emotions aside and deal with the actual facts. People like Tim, they can't do that, because people like Tim are just over-emotional, immature children living in adult bodies who simply refuse to grow up. Lots of people are like that, and every last one of them are irrational, at least in the ways that refuse to conform to reality. Your feelings don't actually mean anything. Only the facts do. Learn to deal. But I think I cut Tim off in the middle of a thought, so let's get back to see where he was going to go with this. Because I have a feeling it isn't anywhere intelligent.
Some religions promote heaven and hell, others teach reincarnation, some say we become one with the universe, and others say we simply cease to exist.
But it doesn't matter what any religion says. It matters what any religion can actually demonstrate really happens. Of those, the last group are the closest to the evidence that we actually have at hand. Granted, people join religions because they are terrified of reality. They don't want to admit that we cease to be. They don't want to die. So they just make up stories in their heads that they cannot rationally justify and then demand it just has to be true because they just don't want to be sad. Now, anywhere but in religion or things that operate like religions, we just laugh at them and tell them that they're stupid, but religion doesn't operate by the same rational rules as everything else because these people are just nuts. And that's not a good thing.
These options can't all be true. We can't go to heaven, be reincarnated, and disappear into the nothingness at the same time.
No, which is why you have to go where reality leads, not where your emotions try to drag you kicking and screaming. Your feelings mean nothing, and you need to grow up and deal with the facts. I know I say that a lot, but this is where the religious tend to go wrong, and plenty of non-religious people do too. They have a very high opinion of themselves, and their egos get in the way of reality, at least of their understanding of reality, because they are terrified of the real world. And that is not a good thing, but sadly, these people just don't care. They think that if they fell out of an airplane without a parachute, screaming that gravity isn't real the whole way down, somehow that's going to save them. And then they go splat. Because your feelings don't mean anything. You need to learn to deal, and they simply refuse. Not that it matters, because reality always wins out in the end. Fifis be damned.
Someone is mistaken. They may all be false, but they can't all be true.
That's true, but you are refusing to acknowledge that you could be wrong too. Seriously, ask the religious if they can be mistaken, and they will almost universally tell you no. They have to be right because they don't want to be wrong. Whereas someone like me, I admit that I could be wrong about pretty much everything. Nothing is ever set in stone. All you have to do is show me the evidence that I'm wrong, and I will change my mind. Whereas the religious never will. They will cling to their immature beliefs forever because they were never using their brains in the first place. They don't care about the facts. They just desperately want to believe.
Logic won't allow it. Or just take the three monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. They all share some things in common, but they differ in significant ways.
But they're all still stupid. That's the one thing that Tim will never admit to because he's emotionally invested in his own beliefs. This is why you need to get rid of your feelings when trying to evaluate the facts, because your fifis don't matter. How do we evaluate the evidence, and only the evidence, to see what is actually true? Once you have the truth, then you can worry about how you feel about it, but it really doesn't matter. And truth isn't eternal. What we think is true today, what we find evidence for today, that could turn out to be false tomorrow, at least to a degree. Just because you feel really, really good thinking that you've got a handle on reality, that doesn't necessarily mean that you do. Your feelings are irrelevant. Learn to deal with it because that's not ever going to change.
Take Jesus, for example. Judaism teaches he died and stayed dead. Christianity teaches he died and rose 3 days later. Islam teaches he didn't die at all and therefore didn't rise.
And the evidence doesn't show that there was ever necessarily a Jesus to begin with. I mean, sure, there could have been an itinerant Jewish rabbi that wandered around 2,000 years ago, but we have no way whatsoever to independently corroborate that. There is no way to prove that any of the details of his supposed life were true. You just really like the idea, but liking the idea doesn't mean anything. So you've got three religions not relying on the facts at all because they all just really like the ideas that they've come to, not rationally, but through blind faith and feelings, and you expect us to be impressed with that. Yeah, try again. I have no more reason to think that there was a Jesus that looked anything like described in the Bible than I do to think that any random Harry Potter living in England actually went to Hogwarts. You need to do a whole lot better than that, and the religious, they're not even trying, are they? They just wish it was true, and that is never going to be enough.
Either Jesus died or he didn't. He either rose or he didn't.
Or he didn't exist at all as a real person and is just a collection of stories in a decades-long game of telephone by people who really wanted to believe in a Messiah. Now, there could have been some kernel of truth at the core of the myths, but as we have no way whatsoever to establish that factually, what's the point in believing it? The fact that there's thunder and lightning, that doesn't make Thor real. The fact that J.K. Rowling took her ideas for Snape from a real person, that doesn't make Snape real. If you can't tell where fact ends and fantasy begins, then there's no reason to believe any of it at all. So why do you? Oh, right, because you're dumb and immature. How could we forget?
Both can't be true. The idea that Christianity and Islam are both true is as contradictory as a square circle. So we reject religious pluralism not because of what we don't know about the other religions, but because of what we do know. Logic demands we take the differences seriously.
No, logic demands that we take the facts seriously, the demonstrable facts. And in the case of religion, there are no demonstrable facts, at least when it comes to the supernatural claims. If Christianity just said, hey, there was just this guy named Jesus once upon a time who said some stuff that we happen to like, yeah, I probably wouldn't say. Necessarily anyhow, depending on what that stuff is. I think that a lot of the things attributed to Jesus in the Bible are kind of stupid and irrational, but saying, I find these sayings worthwhile, that's just a value judgment, isn't it? I personally don't value it. Now, you're welcome to if you like, so long as it doesn't get in my way, but I sure the hell don't have to. But that's not the claim that you're making. You are claiming that Jesus was a magic man that rose from the dead and everyone has to bow down and kiss his magic ass or they'll be tortured for all eternity based entirely on your say-so. Yeah, hard pass. Because that's a stupid claim, especially when it's not backed up by any demonstrable evidence. So as far as I'm concerned, all of you are wrong, at least until you can come up with some way to objectively prove that you're right. And you might want to get on that. Just saying.
An illustration might be helpful. Imagine I have two blue circular pills marked with the letter A.
Let me stop you right there. Can you prove to anyone that you're talking about that this is actually the case? Can I see them for myself? Can I touch them? Can I potentially test them in any way? Because if not, then nobody cares about your stupid empty claims. Now, I'm sure there's more to it. We'll get there in a second. But at the moment, this is not remotely equivalent to anything that the religious say. It is not a good illustration at all. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt, at least for a second, something that I'm sure we're going to regret moving forward, and see where he's going to go with this. Probably not anywhere intelligent, but let's get back to it and see.
Are they basically the same? Well, let's imagine you have a headache. Now, before you take one of these pills, it might be a good idea to investigate a little deeper.
Of course. And the way that we investigate it is to take those two real pills and put them through some known tests to reveal what they're made of and how they actually work. That's fine. But that has nothing at all to do with what the religious are trying to sell us, right? They are making claims that cannot, by any intelligent metric, be investigated. They just have to be believed on faith. And faith doesn't get you anywhere. So let's go back to his original claim about Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. How do we test their views on Jesus when we have no evidence whatsoever that Jesus was ever real to begin with? What are we supposed to be evaluating? I honestly don't know because there's no external evidence for any of it at all. I don't care what it says in your silly books because you have not sufficiently justified any of those books that I should take them seriously. So what are we left with? Faith? Faith means nothing. All we can really say is, we don't know. And we don't know isn't a worthwhile basis for determining truth. It doesn't matter what you wish was true. It matters what you can actually prove is. So Tim isn't getting anywhere here, but I never thought that he would, did you? He is kind of dumb that way, right?
When you flip over the pills, we see that one is aspirin and the other is arsenic.
Which we could discover through rational inquiry. No faith required. You can't do that with any of the supernatural claims in your stupid book or in any book at all. That's the whole point. Doing this entirely rationally, you have to reject all religious claims, or at least the supernatural ones, because none of them are intellectually justifiable or evidentially supportable. So that's what I'm doing. Come back when you can prove to me with evidence that the things that you claim are actually true. I'll wait. So his example here is just dumb, as if that's any surprise, and betrays his complete ignorance of the problem with his argument. He doesn't know why he's wrong. He doesn't care why he's wrong. He just really wants to be right, and that means nothing at all.
Now, do you think they're both basically the same? Of course not. On the surface, they have similarities, but they were fundamentally different. If you have a headache, both will make your headache go away.
You're giving me a headache, you moron. Because here's another thing. Why are you trusting what's written on the pills? They could be wrong. The one marked aspirin could be arsenic and vice versa. You don't know. Because when we get back to the silly books of the religious, you can't tell which, if any of them, are actually true because you cannot put any of them to any kind of rational test. You just have to believe that the one that you like the best is true, and that is not a rational way or an intelligent way to go about determining truth. You have to do a whole lot better, and you can't. I can test the pills. I can send them to a chemist. I can do all kinds of experiments to find out what they actually are. I can't do any of that with your stupid books, and that's why I'm not going to just take your stupid book seriously because you say so. Because I need to be able to do an independent verification, and I simply can't do that with any religion. That's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say? Tim wouldn't, because he just really wants to believe, but that's absolutely stupid. Come back with evidence. I'm still waiting.
But one will make you go away. My point is, the differences matter. Let me add one more thing. Religious pluralism tries to be respectful by saying all religions are equally valid, but in the end, it does the opposite.
Equally valid for the crazy people that believe them, because based on evidence and rational inquiry, they're all equally empty. That's the part that he won't admit to, right? I reject all religions because none of them are justifiable. And that's what Tim should do too. But he's a con man just trying to make a buck off the backs of the painfully gullible, so he can't just admit that no religion can be backed up with any kind of verifiable evidence. It always comes down to faith, and sorry, but faith is worthless. So I don't necessarily agree with the witch with the silly hats, but I absolutely disagree with Tim because he's just preaching to the choir and trying to make a buck, and that's just stupid. So why does he do it? I don't know. You tell me.
Here's why. It refuses to take any of them seriously on their own terms. Each religion makes specific claims about God, the world, humanity, meaning, salvation, and the afterlife.
But none of them provide any evidence that their claims are factually correct. That's the problem. I can make claims too. Invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies made everything and expect you to buy an endless supply of dog biscuits for needy puppies, or you will fry forever in a lake of boiling chocolate. Do you believe me? No, and you shouldn't, because I have offered no corroboratory support for any of it, and neither has any religion. They all just expect you to believe it because it gives you a dopamine shot in the noggin, and that is just stupid. Tim is not helping his case here, but he's only talking to gullible morons who really want to believe and aren't going to ask any of the critical questions that might lead them out of his cult. And that's why he's doing it. Tell me you're not surprised.
But religious pluralism flattens out those claims by saying they're all basically the same.
They are. Unsupported, wishful thinking presented with no evidence whatsoever to justify their truth value. That's what they're all doing. But Tim can't admit that because then he'd be out of a job. So he has to pretend that his religion, and only his religion, is true, based on nothing but fifis and faith, because that's what his audience expects him to say. Does he actually believe it? Who knows, and really, who cares, because his epistemology is garbage regardless. He just really wants it to be true, and that doesn't mean a damn thing. Figure it out, because reality isn't going to change.
That's not respectful, that's dismissive. While I disagree with, say, my Muslim neighbor, I respect him enough to acknowledge the real and significant differences between our views.
And based on the evidence that we have, you're both wrong. Now, you don't care, but the reality is what it is, whether you like it or not. That's why you have to start with the evidence, not with the faith, not with the book, but with the evidence that we have in front of us, and go only where it actually leads. There is no evidence for Jesus. There is no evidence for Allah. There is no evidence leading a rational person to believe any of it. So why do you? Because you're not a rational person, that's why. So now Tim is complaining that some other irrational person in a silly hat doesn't agree with Tim and his silly hat. And that makes no sense whatsoever. And what is it with the religion and the stupid hats? Because it really looks dumb to me. But then again, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below.
Telling him that our beliefs are the same is like saying his view about God's absolute oneness, or of Jesus' identity, or of the divine nature of the Quran doesn't really matter.
It doesn't, not if you're concerned with actual reality, because none of this is remotely supportable with evidence or reason. It's just what he wants to be true. It means no more than the things that Tim desperately wants to be true but can't support intelligently. That's the whole problem, that tons of people believe things that are not rationally justifiable because they really want to believe. They are all equal in the sense that they are all nonsense. If you want to change our minds, feel free to present evidence that your beliefs are factually true. And I don't think Tim is capable of doing that. And that's not exactly a surprise.
Real respect doesn't pretend that there are no fundamental differences. Real respect listens carefully, understands clearly, and acknowledges differences honestly, even when we disagree.
Respect is earned, not simply granted. I don't respect your beliefs, Tim, and I don't respect you for holding them. The same thing goes for your fantasy Muslim neighbor. The same thing goes for the Jews and the Hindus and the Scientologists and every other group that holds irrational beliefs on the planet. You haven't earned it, and you're not even trying to do so. You just really want to believe. I think you're an idiot, and I've watched and responded to enough of your videos to justify that position. I think your beliefs are just as dumb as that of the Muslims and the Jews and every other religion, and if you want me to change my mind, prove me wrong. Try, because you're honestly not doing a damn thing to change my mind right now. That's why his example was so bad, because there, At least you can prove that the pills were real. You can test them, at least potentially. With Christianity, you've got shit, and the religious don't remotely care. So watching the religious shoot themselves in the foot over and over, that's more of a laugh than anything else, because they're all constantly doing it, right? There's nothing else that they can do except, reject these unsupported beliefs for cause, because no one in their right mind should believe any of it without evidence. But I don't think that's coming anytime soon, do you? Too bad, because it would make the world a much better place to be. Any day without Tim Barnett and his screwball scam artists in religion, that's got to be a good day, right?